Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we are going to be going on the night shift to explore some dark and creepy places. So I hope you have your flashlight ready and your wits about you, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This is a true story that happened to me some years ago. I'm from Germany and worked at an old people's home in a little German town at the time. The facility was in a rural area on the outskirts of town. One night, I was working the night shift with a new co-worker that I had never worked with before. He was in his mid-50s, wearing little round glasses, and for some reason seemed to be a little strange on first sight. There were always 2 workers alone in the facility at night, and our job was to watch over 100 rooms on 3 floors and make the control rounds through the whole facility. We weren't allowed to use the elevators for security reasons at night, and had to use the stairways instead. I remember the strange weather that night. It was stormy and wild outside. When my shift started at about 10 p.m., the weather was wild and stormy. At this time, most of the personnel were gone. Only one older nurse was in the station room on the 2nd floor, where we had our headquarters at night. She wasn't used to the newer PC programs, and it took her longer to finish her stuff. Me and my co-worker began our first rounds through the house, using the stairways which had heavy doors, and we had to close them slowly and carefully every time to avoid making too much noise. Everything was quiet. Most of the old people were sleeping, and after all the rooms were checked, we sat down. The 2nd floor station was where we rested and finished up some paperwork confirming that everything was fine. The old nurse was gone at this point, and all the doors to the outside had been closed, and the house was completely quiet when we were sitting on the table. After 15 minutes of sitting in the silence, all of a sudden, a heavy door in the stairway was smashed hard. We looked at each other without saying a word, and immediately ran into the stairway. I ran up to the 3rd floor, and my workmate sprinted down on the ground floor. We saw nothing, and nobody. We even checked the stairway windows. All were closed. Someone must have been in this stairway, we concluded. As we found nothing, we continued on our tour, starting from the 3rd floor down to the ground floor. From there, only I could not stop thinking about who the hell would sneak around the floors in the middle of the night. It was about 2 a.m. when we had to change the double sheets from an old invalid man who had wet himself. I stood in the corner of the room besides the bed, backed up against the wall, with my co-worker on the other side. I remember me watching the door, waiting for someone to peer into the room. While I was concentrating on the door, my co-worker was there with the gentleman. I was just thinking and absent-mindedly looking, just to see if the guy would walk by. And he did. We both saw him and we freaked out, accidentally twisting the old man a bit too far, but he was okay. We gathered our stuff, and proceeded, after we attended to the old man, to make our way down to try and find where he had gone. We made our way down to the ground floor, and everything was quiet, with only the wind blowing around the house. And suddenly, we heard a dropping sound, like someone dropped a knife or something metallic. The sound came from the kitchen area, and we ran to the closed glass door where the sound came from. It was a long dark hallway with a back door leading to the trash cans and a parking lot at the end. We opened that door and searched every single room. I felt extremely uncomfortable and expected an attack every moment, and again we found nothing. Some hours later, we started our last tour for the night. We split up this time, and I checked the rooms as usual. When I looked into one particular room, an old lady was awake and sat up in her bed. She asked me if it was me in her room who had just been 5 minutes ago. I tell her that it wasn't me, that I just started on my route. She told me that 5 minutes ago she clearly heard someone enter her room. She asked who it was, but got no reply, and then the person slowly backed away and closed the door. I got a creepy feeling while listening to the old lady. I told her to push the alarm button next time. I think it's unnecessary to say how I felt for the next few hours of every time I entered a room or walked around a corner. I expected some stranger standing there at all times. I was going to be more than happy when this shift came to an end. A few days later, I met the old nurse who left the facility late at night and told her the story. She told me that the back door to the kitchen area was wide open when she went to get her car that night, and she left us. She reached to open the dark back door from the parking lot and called if someone was there. When suddenly, she got a very bad feeling, turned around, ran to her car and drove off quickly. She was scared out of her mind and tried to reach and warn us, but never found my number. I told her the back door was definitely closed when we checked that area. We never did find out who the creepy freak was who snuck around that place at night. Many night shift workers also reported a similar experience in the following months. The co-workers I had to work with that night were fired after more complaints about this person emerged over time. I'm glad I didn't have to work night shift there, and I quit shortly after this anyway. Too much freaky for me. I used to work the graveyard shift in the ICU. Besides seeing shadows and hearing the weird bump here and there, reality is creepier than anything. I could always tell when I got there at 7 p.m. that someone was going to die. The whole unit was just buzzing. The quiet patients were jittery and needing things all through the night. But I had to sit next to everyone's heart monitor, the Unit 1. I would come in and everyone's heart would be elevated, except for the ones that was dying. Theirs were always slower. But as the night wore on, their rates would go up and down, and the person dying just kept dropping. And then the patient would flatline, and everyone's heart rate would jump about 10 or 20 beats, like a surge, and then a big drop back to their normal rates. Then the person would be called. How could 10 to 20 people in a private closed door room know someone was dying? All of them knew. It was just weird. One night, a lady was dying. The hospice workers were with her, and the lady was screaming all night long. Just screaming the words, "Take them away! I can't stand the sound!" At one point, I had to take something to the room, and when I walked in, she said, "I must be dying. My room is full of broken babies. And they're yelling at me. I beg you, make them stop." Then she grabbed her ears and started screaming. I kid you not. She died 5 minutes later. Her profession, you wonder? She was an abortion doctor. I used to do the security at a government building in a capital city that I cannot name for legal reasons. I used to do the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift. And one of the things that we had to do was an hourly walkthrough of the building. It was 5 floors, and then you had to go out on the roof, climb a small set of stairs, and go into a tiny room where some mechanical equipment was. They had a big wooden stopper on the door, held open while you hit the button that recorded the time you went through. One time, I had just put the stopper in, turned around, and started walking towards the back wall, when the door slammed shut behind me. I actually screamed out loud and froze for a minute. You have to have a security badge to be able to access the roof, and I was literally the only person in the entire building. And I know this because I was in charge of access control for the building and the parking garage. Also, a person would have had to pull the stopper out, which took some effort, and then ran out the door without me noticing within the space of about 2 seconds. So, there is absolutely no way. There was also no way that the wedge came out on its own. It's colossal, made of wood, and had some material on the bottom to ensure it constantly stayed where it was. Also, it was no way near the door. I admit, I didn't stick around to find out. It took all my strength to get the damn door open and run. That was why we had the wedge, because the door was so damn heavy. I'm surprised I was able to open it. But fear does things to a person. I work at a hotel in Chicago. It's super old and has a bunch of history behind it. A lot of the night shift have crazy stories that happened to them, or someone they were working with that night. I love hearing all the different tales, and I've always been open to different possibilities of what happened, paranormal or not. I think of how many people could have passed away there for one reason or another throughout the years. Everything from senior citizens to suicides or violence can happen at a busy hotel. That and old buildings have dated ventilation systems or plumbing, so there's bound to be weird sounds. I do security there, so we get to walk around freely and explore while on patrols. So I pick up an overnight shift for one of the guys, and I'm walking around the 24th floor, and it's laid out like this. Picture an upside down T. At the intersection of the lines, there is a bathroom. The hallway going left leads to a roof door on the south side, and the hallway to the right leads down to a long hallway to the other roof door on the north side. Going straight leads you to an elevator bank on your left. It's sometime after 2:30 a.m. and I'm walking from the elevator bank towards the bathroom, and I can clearly hear someone inside. It sounds just like voices, but I thought realistically, more like someone watching a video on their phone at a high volume. Just a mix of frequencies, and I couldn't really make anything out. While I'm walking closer to the bathroom, I look to my right facing the south and see a white plastic bag on the ground. Facing the bathroom, I make my way towards the bag. I crouch down, open it, and see it's an apple, a few oranges, and a banana. Homeless and mental illness vagrants are an issue, and I call my then supervisor to meet me up there. I think there could possibly be one in the bathroom up here, and somehow they got up using the fire escape or a main stairwell. It's also worth mentioning that the roof doors on both sides are alarmed, and none have gone off. As I make my way back towards the bathroom, I hear the elevator ding, and my supervisor comes out to meet me accompanied by my manager. It's a safety in numbers kind of thing. So we're quiet, and I hand motion for them to get a little closer, towards the bathroom. I point to my ear and towards it, and they confirm they heard it too. So we put gloves on, which is normal, and we didn't want to make contact with anything you didn't want to. I go and open the door, and all of a sudden it's quiet. There's only a single stall right next to the urinal and the sink. The toilet and urinal don't have auto flush sensors, and the hand dryer dispenses paper towels as well, not electric. I do a double take in the bathroom and look back to the guys. They have a curious look on their faces too. We're all surprised at how quiet it got. I'm walking out of the bathroom towards the white plastic bag, explaining to them how I thought there was just a homeless person here because it sounded like a video on a phone, and then there was this fruit in the bag, and to check it out. I open it up, and it's all rotten. The oranges look blue with white hairs, and everything is just discolored. The banana looks super black, and everything grossed me out and caught me by surprise. I drop the bag because of the what the hell moment. I look over to the guys, and my supervisor walked towards the elevator doors like, "Screw this, I'm out of here." My manager kind of laughs, and he's like, "Is this your first time being spooked?" He's a 20-year-old guy, and the way he said it make it sound so commonplace. I pick up the bag and throw it away, just before we all got onto the elevator and left. I haven't been able to explain what happened. We all heard the same thing, and then it was gone. There are stranger stories, I'm sure, but that's what happened to me, while I've been there anyway. It's pretty wild that no alarms were tripped in the area, and the entry by elevator wasn't available either. This floor is secluded, and has restricted access to it. You have to have the dispatch officer send you via elevator, or send it up on an independent mode. Doors were secured too, and all fire escapes were alarmed as well. The stairwells require key access. I still go up there, and haven't experienced anything like that since. Every now and again, I'll look behind me because I just want to make sure that no one else is there. I get a very odd vibe now and again, but it doesn't feel super terrifying. It's just a cool building, with lots of different history and stories. I mainly work the night shift at a fairly large apartment complex. Several things have happened in my tenure that I would label as spooky. One of them was walking through the parking lot that is adjacent to a high school. There is a large forested area near the rear of both property that isn't technically owned by either place. One night, I'm walking along when I spot a glint with my flashlight. I go to check it out, only to find a lawn chair facing a tree. The chair had a shirt, hat, pants and shoes situated, like someone was sitting there. Not necessarily spooky in itself, but when I came back 10 minutes later, they were gone. Another time I was locking up the on-site gym. There are these 2 large windows to the outside that all gyms seem to have. As I turned towards them, there was this woman standing there, pressed against the glass with a gigantic smile on her face, like almost Glasgow smile wide. She stood there for a moment before waving. I went outside to see if she needed help with anything, but when I went around the corner, she was gone. This happened only a month and a half ago, but I got a call asking me in a low tone if I was going to be on duty all night. I asked the caller who he was and why he wanted that information. He merely replied, "You'll see," and hung up. To my knowledge, nothing has happened, but I still found it incredibly unnerving. I used to work at a secure facility for young people who were at risk. Think juvie, but kids who are at risk to themselves and the community are placed there for not committing crimes just for some respite. Anyway, night shift at the female unit. Sitting in the night office with a couple of other staff. There are windows all about waist height on the walls of the office, so that we can see around. I hear some footsteps and see a ponytail bob past the window. Thinking it's one of the girls that was crouched down trying to sneak around to hang out in another girl's room, which is a common occurrence but not allowed, I go out to the hallway and find no one there. I check through observation windows of all bedrooms, and all the girls are in bed asleep or watching TV. I think, shit, my mind is playing tricks on me because it's late and I'm tired. I return to the night office and sit down and say nothing. One of the other staff members then asks, "Who was that?" And I say, "Wait, you heard footsteps too?" I checked, and everyone is in their rooms, but no one was out. Then one of the older staff members who had been there a few years says, "It would have been one of the ghosts. See and hear them enough times in the hall." She was adamant and told me of other things that she had witnessed. I never believed in ghosts or had an explanation for what happened that night, but I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. For those of you keen to hear her story, well, this place has housed females for quite some years. And of course, with people being at risk, you do get the occasional person who decides that enough is enough. There was this one girl apparently, Lucy. Lucy was a very strange but funny character. She was the kind of person that could either light up a room on a good day or bring it all down on a bad. This was when my co-worker had only just started, and she'd got to know Lucy quite well, and as far as everyone could tell, she was on the road to a decent recovery. She was being polite, she was behaving, and she wasn't showing as many signs as before of having destructive tendencies towards others or herself. Her self-harming had become a minimal, and people were very happy with her progress, and there were even talks with the staff she might be ready to go back to the world soon enough. However, this would prove not to be the case. One evening, she got into an altercation with a member of staff. Something apparently about some pencils. I don't know. She told me that the rule was that they couldn't use them after a certain hour, and she was trying to finish a particular art piece and insisted on taking it to her room. When she was denied, she got incredibly upset, more so than expected, and in a huff, stomped off to her room, not to be seen for the rest of the night. As the night shift workers made their rounds, they went around to check, and everything seemed in order. They went and looked, and everyone was in bed, or watching TV, as usual. So the next morning, all the girls show up for breakfast. Of course, except Lucy. So, a member of staff goes to get her sorry butt out of bed, assuming that she was still stroppy about the whole pencil incident that night. Turns out that she wasn't stroppy at all. She was dead. Unbeknownst to the facility, she had somehow managed to unscrew the blade of a pencil sharpener, and at some point during the night had sliced her wrists and bled into her bed, where she lay. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I was told that with those thin little blades, cutting would have taken ages, and from the wounds it would appear that Lucy was persistent. Everyone was incredibly shocked. Out of everyone there, she was probably one of the least likely people to kill herself, especially at that stage of recovery. But then again, perhaps she was just very good at playing the part of someone who was recovering. Of course, the member of staff that refuted her pencils had a meltdown. She felt entirely responsible for her suicide. But, as a senior member of staff pointed out, if she was already that on edge from something so mundane, then it's very likely that she would have done it for any other reason if it hadn't have been for the pencil incident. Everyone there was of course very upset by this tragic incident, and stricter measures were made to ensure that nothing like that could ever happen again. But that wasn't the end of Lucy. No. They say that with no particular rhyme or reason, sometimes you can catch glimpses of her walking through the hallway, or just hear her footsteps coming up and down. That's pretty much the extent of it. I mean, I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. I just don't know if it was her. But either way, I hope that she, and the other girls that have passed away here, have found their place in what lies beyond. I used to work the night shift, doing security, for one of the oldest hospitals in my region. I managed to do it for 3 years, but the incidences slowly turned into paranormal activity, which made me rethink my career choices and made me take up a regular day job. Coincidentally, this building had some of the oldest elevators in the city. Just thought you should know that. One thing that stuck out to me after was the schedule change and wait for an elevator. An average turnaround time from the basement of the hospital for an elevator is 6 minutes, which is a hot topic for the 4,300 associates. This caught me off guard at first, because during the night shift, you didn't even have to push the button. An elevator would just show up. It would show up, and I would just mumble to myself, "Yeah, I know you're here." Then carry on as normal. I wouldn't pay it much mind. Some things you couldn't really ignore though. Sometimes, paranormal activity would just interject into your shift in the middle of the night. There were random alarms, motion sensors that were tripped, and my dispatcher would say, "Just moths flapping in front of the camera." He justified it like that, but I was the one who had to go to these alarms to investigate. There is that feeling that you're not alone, but that is because we do deal with transients on a regular basis. Transients don't make my hair stand up though. Then there are the assist calls that we would go to frequently. Older patients hallucinating. That's how it's charted, at least. I will say that on most of these calls, I could feel a different pressure in the air. And again, my hair stood on end. For anyone who can relate, there are just little incidences over time that deductive reasoning steps in and organizes for you. I'd say it all came to a head at about 3:15 Central Time on a brisk morning. I was checking fire extinguishers in the area that were not being used. We have the only key to the area, and it was used as the ER for the last 64 years of our facility's existence. That's early 1900s medicine, not the most comfortable care. You can walk into that place and feel an unsettling vibe, just stressful and heavy. Maybe it's because I knew some of its history, but I'm not the only one who hates going there. On this certain brisk morning, there was a very loud thump on one of the walls in the interior treatment area. I stopped and thought about what just happened and noped out of there, walking backwards and securing the door behind me. We checked cameras and alarms and had no indication of activity in the area within about 9 hours of my visit. I still can't explain it to this day. I worked the overnight shift in a large medical clinic. The place was over 80 years old when I started working there, and had been built out of kind of piecemeal. So it spread over a few acres, and had areas that would be left empty, as renovations were being done. It also had research labs, offices, and medical school training areas inside. One night, I was on the 17th floor, and heard a ruckus coming from below me. I headed down to the 6th floor, expecting some construction equipment to have fallen over. Now, there is only one large office on the 6th floor, and it is a big U-shape. So if you walk in one door, you can only see half of the office. I try the first door and it's locked. I walk to the second door and try that one. It is also locked. I try and get the door open and go inside. I flip the light switch and nothing happens. So I pull out my flashlight. I flip on my flashlight and see a filing cabinet with the drawers open and papers strewn everywhere. I keep looking, and a couple of desk chairs were also flipped over. There was a computer monitor that looked like it had been slung against the wall, and the blinds had been ripped off one window. As I round, I see a shadow out of the corner of my eye. It darts towards the first floor door. I had tried to open it, and the door flies open. Being young and dumb, I decided to pursue whatever went through the door. I get through the door just in time to see the fire exit door starting to close. I kick into high gear and explode through the door. I could hear footsteps about one flight below me, and I kept chasing the footsteps as fast as I could, and even start skipping stairs. By the time I hit the fire exit at the bottom, the door is just finishing its outward arc, so I keep going thinking I can still at least get a description of whoever did this. I exit the door and look to the right. It was the most logical course of travel as they exited before the door was fully open. There was no sign of anything. I look to the woods across the street, and there's no one trying to climb the fence. I look to the left and see one of the cleaners sitting beside an overturned bucket. There was a half-eaten sandwich on one side of him and his phone on the other. I asked if he saw anyone, and he said he was sitting on the bucket when the door flew open with enough force to knock him over. He was convinced I had slung open the door just to mess with him, and then I told him what happened. His response was, "That is why we don't go up there at night." I managed to convince myself it was a homeless person that got in somehow. Every night guard I told that story to had a similar story from that office though. I found out it has been empty for months because it was deemed unfit for occupation. They remodeled it a few months later, but stories kept coming out about people coming in and finding their chairs flipped over or their stuff moved. I still choose to believe it was a homeless person, but I never went back up there after midnight. This happened to me some years ago. I was in my early 20s, greedy, and waking up with a raging hangover and about an hour's sleep from the house party that was still going. I drag myself into the shower, kick the couple that are screwing in there out, shit-shave shampoo on, and go to work. I fell asleep on the train, but didn't miss my stop. Thank goodness. Saturday average overnight shift in a hospital/cancer research building, alternating a patrol every 2 hours with my co-guard, one in the camera and response room, and the other pounding the pavement on rounds. I am absolutely finished by 2 a.m, which happened to be the third patrol. Going through floor 4 used to be Ward 4 palliative care, which was now a floor down. Now it was records and was always dark as shit. So I always did the restricted access part first, off to the right. Swipe my pass, the door buzzes and slide it open. I hang a right, walk down a long corridor checking doors, hanging my left, short corridor and checking the doors. Everything was sweet, so I make my way back. That's when I saw some old bloke standing there, with a hospital gown and an IV pulse staring at me. Not an uncommon sight, but for 2 a.m. in the morning, it was a kick in the chest. I smile at him and ask him if he's alright. He replies that he is. Just got turned around on his way back from the smoking area, he says. And then my beeper goes off. I look down at it and look back up, through the door that he couldn't have accessed without a bloody card key. I'm not gonna lie, I was shitting bricks. The rational part of me kicks in. I've had 0 sleep, and a gut full of grog from the night before. Well, day before. And I'm probably just seeing shit. But it still spooked me. I wandered through the dark archive section. That was fun. But just to be safe, I dial a call to let them know that there might be an old bloke floating around. Yeah, this was before mobile phones, and it was commonplace, so it was just beepers and landlines back then. The co-worker tells me to head to Ward 4 for a code grey, cold room, to escort a deceased patient. Great. Just what I needed right now. So I walk back through to get on the elevator to head down to Ward 4. The nurse is on there, smokes in hands and red around the eyes. She's going to the smoke deck. Told me they just lost one. And I replied, I know. I'm heading there now for the code grey. Yeah, you can see where this is going. Not only was the poor bugger I escorted the same bloke I swear I saw in the records room, but later on, when I relayed this to my co-worker who laughed at the whole thing, even showing me the footage of me pausing at the end of the corridor with absolutely no one there, promising he wasn't going to tell anyone, and he never did. But once he went on his patrol, a thought occurred to me. After hours, nurses and staff were logged in electronically, with their pass cards, having to visually check IDs and the like, as a lot of top-tier research happens in this building. The nurse I spoke to didn't exist. Couldn't find a single record of her on paper. None on the computer, or even the bloody smoking room camera area. I never worked night shift there again. When I was younger, my father worked a part-time job cleaning the local theatre after shows. Occasionally, he would let me tag along, and I could help him out for some allowance money. This building was built in 1916 and had been used as an auditorium and for formal dinners. Most areas and floors on the 4+ levels and basement level had been blocked or converted off by the 90s. This theatre had 2 screens, a huge first floor screen and a small upstairs one. We worked alone in this locked building, and one night I was sweeping up popcorn in the bottom cinema, while my father cleaned the stairs going up to the top floor. About 3 rows of seats cleaned, when what sounded like a baby started to cry at the bottom of the row. This was very loud and distinct, and I froze, and it lasted 10 seconds until I ran to my father. He looked and found nothing, and it wasn't unusual for teenagers to try and sneak in for the night. Perhaps it was one of those, I thought. On the last occasion I helped him clean, I was cleaning the upper stairs of the cinema. As soon as I walked through the door, something like a dark figure bolted for the fire exit around the corner, down a small hall. The doors had alarms that were always set. This thing disappeared and didn't set off any alarms. My dad did a full search again, and nothing. I never went back to help him after that. My father said the theatre never did bother him, and whoever was there was just keeping him company. It probably helped that my father is deaf and never had to hear what I heard. The theatre is Bad Axe Theatre in Mississippi, if anyone is interested. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits now, but my 11 and 12-year-old self did not like that place. I am an officer at a large mental health facility. It has been a mental health facility since the late 1800s, but a few buildings have been here since earlier than that. The land was used during the Seminole War of 1812. However, there have been artifacts that have traced back to 400 BC. So, a lot of history is in this area. One of my stories is from here. I was on a roving patrol, and we have towers that are no longer in use, but do have restrooms in them. So it's about midnight, and the gopher starts trying to poke his head out. Well, the closest tower is the one that they call the Haunted Tower. However, me being me, and due to the urgency of the situation, I say screw it. So I park the car and run up the stairs while playing the dangerous game of pull down your pants before you manage to unlock the door. The tower stays locked, so I'm doing my best to get in, and I finally managed to unlock the door and bolt in. I reach the toilet, and I'm sitting there minding my own business, as one does. It's also very dark, because even though I had my flashlight next to me, I didn't have enough time to turn it on, if you know what I mean. All of a sudden, I feel a hand on my leg, and then something pulls my leg out really fast. I grab my flashlight, thinking that someone was messing with me. So I pull back the privacy curtain and shine it around the room. There is no one, and they cannot hide. And I'm sitting next to the only entrance and exit in the entire tower. I think I broke a world record in wiping that night, and I can genuinely say it scared the shit out of me. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode of Night Shift Stories, as voted by a lot of you. It's funny, because some of these stories actually turned out to be based in hospitals, so it was almost like a bit of both. But seriously, it wasn't on purpose, it was just what I had in stock. And thank you everyone so much for listening. If you did enjoy the video, a like and a comment would be tremendously appreciated, as it goes a long way to let other people hopefully find this content that you probably enjoyed. And in order to not miss a video, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon for good measure. If there's a story that you would like me to read, rest assured that I will probably get to it, assuming that you post it to my Reddit or send it to my email. All that you need to do is make sure you paragraph it, put in plenty of punctuation, and lots of description, and you're good to go. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.